Being a fan of both movies and metal, I love to see when those two worlds meet, especially when it's unexpected. So in this video, let's talk about 8 of those films, what metal band is in each one, and review the albums that the featured songs are from. Stay tuned. Before we begin, I wanted to go over some of what I won't be covering in this video. First off, no documentaries. I'm looking for more incidental appearances, not ones where the band would naturally be there, such as in genre docs or even docs about the actual band. Basically no fun in picking those. Likewise, no movies that are focused on the band itself, such as Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, for example. I mean, of course Kiss is in there. They're in the name of the movie, they're in the movie, it's all about them. So those are types of films that are out as well. And no appearances of just one musician in a cameo role. It has to be the band, preferably playing live or lip syncing. So with that, let's talk about metal in the movies. First up is The Incubus, which is a 1982 Canadian supernatural slasher that focuses on a small Wisconsin town where a mysterious figure is raping and murdering young women. The movie has a mix of supernatural horror and murder mystery elements, also lots of graphic violence and sexual content, which is probably why it's rated R. Overall, not a horror masterpiece by any stretch, but it does have a bit of a cult following among genre fans, despite its bad pacing and somewhat confusing plot. So, characters in the film are in a movie theater where the band in question is on screen performing the song Vice Versa. The band clip itself was originally taken from a smaller film called Biceps of Steel, which was shot in 1980 but not released until 2003. So The Incubus is when the clip first appears chronologically. And speaking of Vice Versa, here's the album it's from. This is the second studio album for British hard rock band Samson, entitled Head On. It was released in 1980 by Gem Records, and this is also an OG copy of the album. So I'm hearing some early Rush influence here, though not as much of the prog thing, but definitely a strong 70s rock vibe overall, especially in the guitar tone and the vocal sound. We've also got some catchy sing-along choruses here and there as well. Speaking of that voice, it's none other than Bruce Dickinson, prior to him joining Iron Maiden. Gotta say though, the mix is a little substandard with lead guitars too high at times, and the snare sound is occasionally grating. It sounds more like a child's toy drum here and there. I did hear a more recent digital version where the leads aren't so high, so perhaps it's just the original version that has that. On the other end of things is the bass guitar, which has some real presence and certainly worth hearing. And of course, Bruce's fantastic vocals shining throughout. Favorites on this one include Vice Versa, of course, as well as Too Close to Rock, with that classic Bruce Dickinson scream. I should also mention the track Thunderburst, as it sounds like it was somewhat pilfered by Iron Maiden for the Ides of March, but that's not the whole story. It was originally written back in 1977 when drummer Thunderstick was in an early version of Maiden. In fact, there's Thunderstick right there. Iron Maiden bassist Steve Harris does claim sole credit for the Ides of March, but he, along with Samson members, are credited on Thunderburst. So take that as you will. Music video for the track Hard Times is out there, which might have also been swiped from Bipeds of Steel, or Biceps of Steel rather. Why not? So although their follow-up album Shock Tactics has better production and songwriting, I wouldn't exactly count this album out. There are a few really strong tracks here and some occasionally solid riffs, though it's possible that Bruce is the best thing on this album. So there's that. Overall, a decent record, but also bested by their next album. Next up is The Dungeon Master, also known as Rage War. It is a 1984 fantasy horror film about a demonic wizard who challenges a modern-day computer programmer for a battle of technology versus sorcery, with the programmer's girlfriend as the prize. Given the different segments in the movie, it could be considered an anthology, with each part being directed by someone different. Not a gory or excessively violent film, which garnered a PG-13 rating back then. There are some fun and rather creative special effects in this one, though it does suffer a bit from incoherency at times, or maybe that's part of its charm. Take your pick. Setup here is that in one segment of the film, the antagonist, possibly the devil, and played by Richard Mall of Night Court fame, sends the lead character to battle the Devil's Band, who appears on stage performing the track Tormentor. The good guy's girlfriend is tied to a rack and he is compelled to save her from the evil man with the buzzsaw blade between his legs. Amazing. As for the track in this film, it is from American metal band W.A.S.P. and it is found on their self-titled debut album released in 1984 by Capitol Records. This is also an OG copy. Really love Blackie's gruff but melodic vocals here, definitely more aggressive than on following albums. Also, lead trade-offs by Piper and Holmes really stand out on this record. In fact, killer leads throughout. And one-time drummer Tony Richards is pretty effective here as well, though not a showman by any means. The majority of his fills are simple snare rolls, which is fine. I mean, the material doesn't really require fancy drum work as it stands. I mean, it's anthemic, it's fist pumping, you know what you're getting. But regarding his drumming, I think there is a drinking game here. I mean, maybe drink every time Richards does a snare roll. If you want to be bombed out of your mind, I think that's what's going to do it for you. Anyways, favorites on this album are I Wanna Be Somebody and Love Machine, as well as Tormentor, of course. Also music videos for I Wanna Be Somebody, as well as Love Machine. Nice that that works out that way. I should mention that the track in the film is an earlier version of Tormentor and is edited to better fit what's happening on the screen. You can tell it's not the actual album version due to a little bit of lyrical change. So, not a weak track on this record. Songwriting is simpler on this album than on future releases, but the performances really put it over the top for me. The fact that they're hungrier on this one can be heard in every single track. True classic. Next is Pee-wee's Big Adventure, released in 1985. It is a comedy film directed by Tim Burton, which makes way too much sense the more you watch the movie. The plot centers around eccentric man-child Pee-wee Herman, who gets his beloved bicycle stolen in broad daylight and then sets out across the U.S. on the adventure of his life to get it back. It's an odd little film. It has bizarre set pieces, offbeat characters, and a bit of slapstick thrown into the mix. On the surface, it appears to be a kid's movie, but plenty of surrealism and dark humor to keep it interesting for us grown-ups. So that's why it gets a PG rating, most likely. The setup for the scene in question is that Pee-wee is on the run from security guards at a movie studio and runs right by the band, who just happen to be shooting a music video for the song Burn in Hell. A music video that never happened in actuality, by the way, so don't go looking for it outside of this movie. Of course, Burn in Hell is from this classic album. This is the third studio album from American hard rock band Twisted Sister, entitled Stay Hungry, released in 1984 by Atlantic Records. And this is also an OG copy. Production here is a bit more polished than the last album, which does take a bit of the bite out of the performance, especially in the guitar tone. Still, the songwriting and Snyder's vocals carry things along pretty well. As for the overall record, the first track, Stay Hungry, is a strong opener with a catchy chorus and solid riffs. Though solos might seem the occasional weak spot here, things get a bit commercial immediately after with We're Not Gonna Take It, which did take me some time to get used to when the album was brand new. I did come in on the album before, so my expectations were certainly there. Though I do like that the album gets dark on track 3 with Burn in Hell. And that's a pattern we see here. The more mainstream tracks are parsed out between the heavier and sometimes faster tracks, so the record really does never sit in one place for very long. And it really is the deeper cuts on Stay Hungry that hold up better, especially over time, including album closer SMF, which really is a bit of a You Can't Stop Rock and Roll Part 2, though maybe slightly less powerful siblings to that awesome song. Favorites on this one are, of course, Stay Hungry, as well as Burn in Hell and SMF. There are also music videos out there for We're Not Gonna Take It, I Wanna Rock, and The Price. It should be said that Twisted Sister's appearance in Pee-wee's Big Adventure was because of Paul Reubens specifically. He met Dee Snider at a New Year's party that MTV threw back in 1984. The band was in town playing, and Reubens approached them about doing the cameo. They said yes, so there they are. So overall, a record that has some definite peaks and valleys, and despite a couple singles that may or may not have gotten tired over the decades, there is still plenty here to shake that fist and bang that head to. Next up is Like Father, Like Son, a comedy released in 1987 about a mysterious potion that switches the personalities of a buttoned-up surgeon and his laid-back son. Classic body swap plot, a genre I'll be discussing again for the next movie. In addition to that, the movie also explores the whole generation gap thing between the two characters, something that may or may not translate well to the modern kids these days. The movie is very 80s in a lot of significant ways and is rated PG-13. Anyways, in this movie, the band in question performs live with Kirk Cameron's character, as his dad, incessantly complaining about the band's music. Because, as we all know, parents just don't understand. Also, you get 2 songs this time, Dance All Night and She Never Looked That Good for Me. So, let's get to the album these tracks are on. This is the 3rd studio album from American hard rock band Autograph. It's called Loud and Clear, released in 1987 by RCA Records. And this is an OG copy, and its particular pressing is considered long out of print now. Just in case you need to know that. Anyways, the album was produced by Andy Johns, who did a couple of Cinderella albums, but was entirely making his way through the hair metal bands of the time. Tangier and House of Lords come to mind, so the production certainly has that sheen to it. Also, lots of squealy guitars and random synths here, not to mention some over-processed gang vocals in the choruses. Perhaps a bit of Def Leppard chasing here. It is that time frame, of course, and this record seems a bit guilty of that. As were plenty of other bands, let's be honest. Strangely, only 2 of the 5 members from the album are still alive, Steve Lynch and Steve Plunkett. So I guess it pays to be named Steve in this band. Anyways, as for favorites on it, Loud and Clear, as well as She's a Tease. There was a music video for the title track as well. It even has Ozzy Osbourne and Vince Neil as extras in it, so that's something. Can't really figure out how Autograph came to be in Like Father, Like Son, but I did figure out that the movie came out from TriStar Pictures. TriStar is in part a sibling studio to Columbia Pictures. Columbia owned RCA, and Autograph was on RCA, so maybe that's how it happened? I don't know. But that sounds like some pretty good internet sleuthing there. Probably. So this really was Autograph on the descent. Just 2 years prior, they put out a very successful debut album called Sign In, Please, with the hit Turn Up the Radio. This wasn't that album, but perhaps appearing in this movie got some records sold? Maybe? At any rate, it is a passable hard rock album steeped in the late 80s pop, and if you're looking for that, then maybe you'll find something here worth listening to. Maybe. Next is the 1988 comedy Vice Versa. It's about a divorce executive named Marshall and his 11-year-old son, Charlie, who casually touch a magical Tibetan skull, releasing a mysterious power that transfers Marshall's mind to Charlie's body, and vice versa. In other words, the same plot as the last movie, but with different actors. Though this one is rated PG and the other one is PG-13, so maybe this one is more for kids? Either way, both movies rip off the plot from Freaky Friday to a large degree, so similarities ultimately don't really matter. The movie itself is a typical teen movie for the late 1980s, though Fred Savage skews a bit younger even. The guy looks 11 to 12 years old throughout much of the decade as it stands, despite whatever age he plays on screen. So, there's that. What's particularly interesting is that both of these body swap movies also have heavy bands in them, which is much of the point in discussing them here. So, the scene in the film has the band playing the track Crazy in the Night with Judge Reinhold's character jumping on stage and getting dragged off by roadies. Because he's possessed by his rebellious teenage son who just wants to rock. For Pete's sake, just let the kid rock. And speaking of the track, this is the Crazy in the Night EP from American metal band Malice, released in 1989 by Metal Blade Records. And of course, this is an OG copy. So definitely heavy at times with some killer vocals, though the production is a bit flat. Thankfully, the tracks carry well through that. It's possible that the overall sound quality might have been due to the fact that the label did rush this record out, which I discuss further in a moment. I should also mention that the track Vice Versa, which was also in the movie, is pretty much standard hard rock soundtrack fare, and not a Samson cover, incidentally. It does sound like a Sammy Hagar track to me, even though it isn't. So, a bit tame for Malice, but still listenable. Favorites on this one are Captive of Light, as well as Death or Glory, the first of which is a revisiting of a track from the first Metal Massacre compilation, also from Metal Blade Records. The other is a redo of an old demo song of theirs. What's interesting here is that Metal Blade jumped on the relevance of the band's appearance in the film and then quickly made this record happen. They quickly recorded it and got it out, basically to catch the film's momentum. So the song appears in the movie first and on the EP afterwards. So likely not Malice's strongest material, and this was their final release before they broke up. They did reform in 2006 with the original guitarist and bassist, adding new members for vocals and drums. Haven't heard much from them, though, since 2012's release, New Breed of Gods, but in any case, check out this band's classic era albums, notably the two before this EP. Next up is the 1992 comedy film Wayne's World. It was rated PG-13. The plot centers around two slacker friends who are into the heavy metal, incidentally. They run a public access cable show in danger of being taken over by a sleazy television executive. And the hijinks ensue. Of course, Wayne's World is a Saturday Night Live offshoot movie, as its namesake was a recurring skit on that program. So basically, Wayne and Garth get to see our mystery band live, performing the track Feed My Frankenstein, after which they meet the band's iconic singer backstage and have witty dialogue with him. And speaking of Feed My Frankenstein, here's the album the track is from. This is the 12th solo album from American hard rock artist Alice Cooper, entitled Hey Stupid, released originally in 1991 by Epic Records. This is a 2017 reissue from Music on Vinyl, in case you're looking for it. Stylistically, this is a continuation of what Alice had been doing since 1986's Constrictor. Was it 86 or 87? You'll let me know. Anyways, the songwriting, though, is very much improved here. I mean, at times, this album could be compared to Alice's more pop metal direction of the time, and some of that might be due to the return of writer Desmond Child. But Alice also seems to break away from that at other times, noticeably on slower tracks like Might As Well Be on Mars. Though in the writing credits, I'm also seeing names like Jim Valance and Dick Wagner. Those are familiar names for both Alice Cooper and, dare I say, Kiss. So some song structuring attached to those writers can be heard here as well. Speaking of outside folks, there are a lot of them on this record, and they might explain some of the variety here. They include Slash, Ozzy Osbourne, Vinnie Moore, Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, Nikki Sixx, and Mick Mars. As for favorites on this one, Love's a Loaded Gun, pretty great song. Also Dangerous Tonight and Die For You. Also, a music video came out for the title track. So, it's likely that Mike Myers is the reason why Alice Cooper is in this movie. He did want more classic Alice tracks in the film, but the band's manager insisted on then new material. So, that's what we got. Overall, much better than the previous album Trash, in my opinion. I mean, certainly less predictable and with better songwriting, but strangely fewer people paid attention to it. I mean, Hey Stupid didn't do as well, so there must have been something that got fewer ears checking out this record. It was 1991, and this genre of hard rock was becoming less in favor during that time, so maybe toss that into the mix. Overall, real shame, because it's a strong record for Alice during this era of his band. It should likely be regarded as such as well. So, yeah, check it out, if it's been a while. Next is the 1992 release of Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, the third installment in the iconic Hellraiser horror movie franchise. The plot involves a journalist who, upon investigating a string of bizarre murders, discovers the involvement of the Cenobites, and with some help, seeks to send the newly unbound Pinhead and his legions back to hell. So obviously, rated R. Setup here is that the reporter goes to a rock club to talk to an employee as part of a story. While there, the band in question is on stage playing the track Hanging Judge. Hanging Judge, of course, is from this album. This is Symbol of Salvation. It is the fourth studio album from American metal band Armored Saint. Originally released in 1991 by Metal Blade Records. This is a 2018 reissue, also from Metal Blade Records. So strong opening track in Reign of Fire. The song was heavily promoted when this album came out, as I well remember from my metal director days in college radio. I might have played it a lot over the air as well. Producer on this one was Dave Jerdin, who after this followed John Bush into Anthrax and handled their Sound of White Noise record. Very different albums, very different bands, obviously, but there is that connection, I guess. First album with guitarist Jeff Duncan as well. Fans of a certain 1988 Penelope Spheris-directed metal documentary might remember Jeff from his tail-end stint in the band Odin. Well, he's an armored saint now and has been to this very day. So, good job, Jeff. Favorites on this one, of course, Rain of Fire, great song. Also Dropping Like Flies, Hanging Judge, and Spineless. There are music videos available for Rain of Fire as well as Last Train Home. Also, I'm not really sure how the band got to be in this movie, as I can't find any connections between Metal Blade and the movie company. Likewise, the Armored Saint track is not on the film's official soundtrack at all. So, bit of a bummer there. So as usual, we get this band's brand of thrash-influenced heavy metal, but with some occasional groove, in part brought by Duncan's playing, but likely also from the last bit of writing done by previous guitarist Dave Pritchard, who unfortunately died of leukemia prior to the recording of this album. Also faint hints of prog metal here, elements perhaps influenced by Queensryche at the time. Overall, a well-produced album and largely considered the very best from this band by most of its fans. So yeah, it's pretty good. Next up is the 1994 comedy film Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. It's about a goofy detective specializing in missing animals who goes in search of the missing mascot of the Miami Dolphins. The movie is largely a vehicle for Jim Carrey's quirky and over-the-top humor, which seemed to have worked out for him as it pretty much launched his career. So the scene in question has the title character running from someone in a concert crowd. He jumps up on stage, does a stage dive, comes back and sings with the band. Well, kinda. He awkwardly lip-syncs the track Hammer Smashed Face and does some goofy dance stuff. Of course, fans of the band already know Hammer Smashed Face, but for the rest of you, this is the third studio album for American death metal band Cannibal Corpse. It is entitled Tomb of the Mutilated. Originally released in 1992 by Metal Blade Records. This is a 2021 reissue, also from, could you guess, Metal Blade Records. So some definite Slayer solo worship here, much as other death metal bands of the time were doing and emulating profusely. Deicide also comes to mind in that regard, though that Deicide comparison also applies to the production, which the two bands shared with Mr. Scott Burns, a well-known death metal producer at the time, and at some point had an almost predictable sound and style. I mean, you can definitely hear a Scott Burns production on any record he touches, and this is one of those for sure. Also, we still have Chris Barnes on vocals at this point, which is either a sell point or a strike against, depending on your opinion of the guy. As for favorites, of course, Hammer Smash Face, as well as Addicted to Vaginal Skin and Post-Mortal Ejaculation. Yes, Cannibal Corpse are known for graphic song titles, graphic lyrics, graphic album art. Did I mention graphic? Yeah, that. So the story goes that the makers of Ace Ventura wanted Cannibal Corpse, but that Jim Carrey might have had a hand in that selection. Carrey did know at least some music from the band and specifically wanted Hammer Smashed Face to be the song used, but no one really knows if that interest was sincere or just good research on Jim's part. Anyways, Tomb of the Mutilated is widely considered a death metal classic, and I'd largely agree, though my interest in Cannibal Corpse overall is a bit spotty. But if you're wanting to learn about the classic era of death metal, this is one of those landmark records. So, check it out. So in addition to the bands I just mentioned, there are some others well worth pointing out. Of course, Alice in Chains and the movie Singles, released in 1992 with the track Wood from the album Dirt. Gwar was in Empire Records, that was released in 1995 with the track Sodom A Go-Go from the album This Toilet Earth. AC/DC was in Private Parts, released in 1997 with the track You Shook Me All Night Long from their album Back in Black. Rammstein, the movie Triple X, released in 2002 with the track Feuer frei from Mutter. And Metallica in the Darwin Awards, released in 2006 with the tracks No Leaf Clover and Sad But True from S&M and the Black Album, respectively. Now, I couldn't possibly talk about every single metal band in a movie, so that's where you come in. Let me know which ones I didn't mention, as well as which of the ones I did talk about that might be your favorites. Tell me that and anything else relevant in the comments below. And of course, if you're new to my channel, this is The Accusation Network. My name is Matt, and each and every week I do videos on metal vinyl collecting. I also do videos on classic and modern metal in general, just like this one. that sounds of interest, definitely like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and share my videos with some of your friends. Other than that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.